And again, all very important issues. One of the reasons why I'm, vegan myself is because of some of these issues, but I wouldn't want it to get mixed in with a study.
Right.
Because
this was supposed to be a study.
Yeah, they shouldn't mix them in because let the study results show themselves. Hi everyone, it's Dr. Sanjeev Goel from Peak Human Labs, and today I have my good friend Anil Maheshwari here.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I thought we should finish it up. We were talking about coming back to talk about the second part of the You Are What You Eat Netflix series.
Yeah.
So
we've got a lot to talk about. The results.
And it seems like it's caught on fire. Like a lot of people are talking about this result or the validity or not validity of these results. So I think it's a good time. So let's
absolutely.
Put our 2 cents in.
Yeah. For anybody who wants 2 cents, we've got them.
So let's, I guess, let's give everybody again a preview. If you haven't seen the other episode, basically what happened here, they took 22 pairs of twins, and they gave them an 8-week randomized intervention where one twin had 8 weeks of a vegan diet, and the other twin had 8 weeks of an omnivore diet.
Right.
And then they did a bunch of blood tests and testing on them, and then we basically talked about in the first episode our thoughts about the design and the first 2 episodes.
Right.
And then today we want to unveil the results, which we didn't talk about last time.
Right. And there were some surprising results for sure. Some very interesting stuff.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. So you want to tell us like the summary of the results from what you got, the big time, top level results.
So it's interesting. If you read the study and if you look at and if you watch the show, it's almost 2 different things.
Yeah.
And they focus in the study. The study was it was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, so a pretty big journal.
Yeah.
Like really good credentials. And they were looking at LDL, what would happen to LDL. That was their primary outcome, they call it. But in the show, they talked about a gazillion different things, weight included, and all sorts of things.
The heat map of the genitals. That was one of their.
That was an interesting part of this study. They didn't mention that in the JAMA article at all. I'm not sure why.
But it's interesting that the primary outcome was LDL. Like it wasn't like weight loss or.
Right.
It was actually LDL itself.
Yeah, they wanted to see would this lower LDL, and therefore, if you're assuming if you're lowering LDL, you're decreasing your cardiovascular risk. And so that's what their primary outcome was. But they also looked at weight, I think was their secondary outcome, if I'm not mistaken.
And some of the blood tests, I think,
and
were
then
all secondary outcome too.
Yeah, but I think in the article they only mentioned weight as a secondary outcome. They didn't even, if I recall correctly.
TMAO.
Did they mention it as a secondary outcome?
I think TMAO was a secondary outcome.
Yeah.
HDL, fasting insulin level.
But I think they collected all that data, but I don't think in the original, whatever the setup for the study, that was what they were going to consider a secondary outcome. I don't know. I could be wrong. But yeah, LDL was supposed to be the main gist of the study.
Right.
And so what they found is, not surprisingly, that the vegan group did have a much lower, substantially lower LDL than the carnivore group, or the omnivore group by the end. And that's what you would expect. A plant-based diet should lower your cholesterol or your LDL more specifically, because LDL is raised by saturated fat. Saturated fat is found mostly in animal products. And so that wasn't a surprise. But what was a surprise to me was when you look at the study and you really look at the data, the first 4 weeks of the 8 weeks, in whichever group you're in, is all packaged food. So they package it, your breakfast, lunch, and dinner for you. The only thing you're allowed to kind of do on your own is snacks. You can choose your own snacks. And when you look at the data, they packaged a little bit differently for the 2 groups. So the vegan group was eating, on average, 200 fewer calories than the omnivore group.
Yep.
And they were also consuming 40, I think I did a calculation because I couldn't believe it, 43% less saturated fat than the vegan group. And so I thought, well, you're starting off with a difference, and that's in your packaged food. So the next 4 weeks, after those 4 initial weeks, then they're supposed to keep going.
They go on their own.
Right.
Yeah.
Stick with the diet they have, vegan or versus omnivore, but make it on their own. And interestingly, they varied a little bit from the packaged food, but not that much.
Well, as far as we know, like that's self-reported, right?
Right. That's exactly.
So,
that's
you know,
a potential.
it's interesting on the show. They asked, "Oh, by the way, did you adhere to the plan?" Like, you know, they asked them.
Yep.
And I think it wasn't exactly clear that they were all adhering to the plan.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, you know, you don't know some of these people. Some of them said it was very difficult to remain on the vegan diet or you know.
Right. And then just in general, we know with recall, whenever you're doing things by recall, the results haven't been good in any study.
Yeah.
That is a potential weakness for sure.
Yeah. So I did look through that, some more of the data on the meal differences. So basically the breakfast meal was 280 calories in the vegan versus 310 calories. And then for the entrees, which is the lunch and dinner, it was 390 calories versus 433 calories. So it basically added up to what you're saying, 200 calories less.
Sounds like we're still missing something. Maybe the snacks.
Maybe snacks and things. But what the other big difference was, you're right, saturated fat was significantly low. Fat was significantly lower in the vegan group, so they already started off with eating less fat. Like in the breakfast, it was only 7 grams of fat versus 19 grams of fat. Huge difference.
That's a big difference.
And then carbs was 47 grams instead of 19 grams. And one of the interesting fact here was the added sugar was 4 grams in the vegan group and 0 in the omnivore group.
Wow.
So
interesting.
if they're just little things that could be making a difference, that they had to maybe, I think, there was no reason, like if they're really trying to compare vegan versus omnivore, just make the macronutrient composition exactly the same.
Right. If you
really want to understand animal product versus non-animal product, just make them exactly the same. Because my number one criticism is that this could have just been related to the macronutrient composition of what they're eating.
Right.
Nothing to do with the animal protein.
Yeah.
If that's what the big part of the study is, animal protein or not.
Right.
You know, it's not really clear. If you're just feeding people less protein, which they were, they're feeding them less protein.
In the vegan group.
You're gonna have a huge impact, anyways.
Which showed up in one of the secondary outcomes, whether they intended to or not. One of the secondary outcomes was that the omnivore group gained muscle mass, and in the vegan group, they did not. If I recall correctly, they might have even lost a little bit of muscle mass. But the vegan group did lose visceral fat, and we know visceral fat is the worst kind of fat. That's the fat in your belly that envelops your organs, and causes diabetes, blood pressure, cholesterol. So that is truly a nice finding with this study.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. That it looks like the vegans had more visceral fat loss, versus the omnivores, which is
a really good finding. Yeah, that's a great finding. But like you said, it would have been even more meaningful if everything was the same, because they lost more fat in general. They lost, I think, in the study, they lost an average of 1.9 kilos more per person.
Yeah.
So that's 3 pounds. Yeah. So if you're losing 3 extra pounds, is it some of it coming from the visceral fat? So, if the calorie count had been the same and then they had lost visceral fat, I think it would have been more surprising and unique.
Yeah.
But
I think it was actually if the producers were hoping that vegan diet would come out really positive, there were some things that were like concerning to me.
Okay.
That the vegan diet people seemed to not gain as much muscle.
Right.
And if anything, I think some of them, they lost muscle.
Right.
And, they lost weight, but some of that weight that they lost was muscle weight.
Right.
Is really concerning to me, because lean body mass is so important.
Yeah.
So was it being caused because they were not feeding them enough protein? That's the concern.
That's what I would want to know.
So it's like if they'd only given them the same amount of grams of protein, then we could really compare, what's actually happened to lean body mass with vegans versus omnivores. But right now, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Because the vegans were actually losing lean body mass, which is going to have a longer term impact on metabolic rate. Right. Resting metabolic rate. So I think, somebody might have a temporary loss of weight, but if you're going to lower your metabolic rate, that's not a good sign.
As a matter of fact, I would say we shouldn't even be comparing overall weight. We should be comparing overall fat loss. Yeah. Or just muscle and fat and not the overall weight, because that's skewing everything. Yeah. It looks like you lost 1.9 extra kilos, but was that fat or was it muscle?
Yeah.
That's the important part.
And it seems like if you ended up not putting on muscle,
Right.
then yeah, your body fat might potentially have increased in the vegan group, even though they lost fat, but they lost more muscle.
Right.
Right. So I just think it probably wasn't, the way they wanted it to turn out.
Right. But I will say this. So in our weight loss program, we do DEXA scans at 0, 6, 12, and 18 months. It is all over the map. There is a general trend with people who are eating more protein and are working out more, they do tend to lose less muscle mass. But it's not always the case. And that's the part that baffles us and these must be genetic differences, because some people will lose a massive amount of muscle even though they're working out and they're getting their protein, and we can't explain why. And then other people are doing almost nothing right are not losing a lot of...
maintain their muscle.
Yeah. So what gives? There's things that we don't understand yet.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I mean, that's one of the things I've noticed with people who are on the GLP-1 medications is that some people lose a lot of muscle.
Right.
And some people just don't lose that muscle. But that's actually really concerning. You see people they're losing weight, but lots of it is muscle on top of the fat.
Right.
So it's becoming extremely thin, and so
So what we don't know is, because of the GLPs have become such a big class and there have been so many studies done, we know what's happening there. What we don't know is all these years of all these highly restrictive eating plans that caused significant weight loss, what did they do to fat versus muscle? They only measured the total, to our point earlier, they only measured the overall weight. So that's not a good parameter.
Yeah.
It's almost as bad as BMI, really. You really want to be measuring waist circumference or fat mass and muscle mass directly to kind of see what kind of effect are we having. And so, there's a lot of this hoopla over the GLPs, and are they causing a lot of muscle loss? Well, first of all, it could be. Yeah, absolutely, we should study that. But it could also be just weight loss in general does that. If you lose a lot of weight and you don't get your protein and you don't work out, there's probably a pretty good chance, no matter what the method, you're going to lose quite a bit of muscle mass, which is, to your earlier point, so important to keep your muscle mass. Nobody wants to. There's a medical term called sarcopenia. Sarcopenia means muscle mass, usually a loss of muscle mass as we age, kind of thing. And you can accelerate that by losing weight the wrong way, for sure, especially if let's say you're over the age of 60 and you're going on one of these GLPs. Are you going to, you certainly can't afford to lose a lot of muscle mass at that age.
It's probably very hard to bring it back, I suspect.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's looked at that, but that would be
Well, we do know, when somebody's hospitalized after the age of, let's say, 70, 75 even, and they're bedridden for even a few days, they lose so much muscle mass. And it takes them weeks and months to get that back, if they get it back. So the older you are, the more important it is to hold on to muscle mass. We do not want to lose that. So... Yeah, but it is a little bit it's a little bit perplexing. Even if you do everything right, you could still end up losing muscle mass. The other thing I have seen, though, is it depends on the quality of the muscle. Sometimes they say you may lose muscle mass, but you're just as strong as you were before. If that's the case, I don't think that's as big of an issue.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of research to be done.
But one thing I noticed in the study is that they did not have the exact same exercise protocol for each group. I think this one twin was going out for walks and the other one was in the gym.
Yes, I saw that.
I'm like, you can't compare it
The
now.
one that was lifting weights, surprise,
gained
muscle mass.
Yeah, gained muscle mass.
And the other one lost muscle mass.
So they should have kept everyone doing the exact same workout. That wouldn't be too hard to tell people exercise the same amount.
Yeah.
For those 4 weeks. A
little bit more control would have been nice. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, the premise of the study, though, I think is nice. Identical twins, same genetic material. What's going to happen if we do this diet versus the other? But then you have to control all the factors as much as you can.
You can't just let them go and do whatever they want the rest of it. And obviously, the thing, they did not control, I think, in the 4 weeks that they were at home eating their own food, they did not control portion size. I think it was just eat till you feel... Eat till you feel full or whatever.
Just cook in the whatever diet you're on. If you're on a vegan diet, cook in a vegan way.
Again, it's a good real world evidence trial in some ways, but we didn't control for that.
Right.
And I suspect people in the vegan diet probably fell full quickly or didn't want to eat as much food, and so they ate less calories, and maybe that's the benefit of the vegan diet, you just eat less calories. Maybe that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of evidence for if you're eating high fiber stuff, more whole foods, and plant-based foods would certainly fall in that. It takes longer to eat, and just that. And we know everybody eats, we as a society, we're eating way too quickly. And that's the problem with ultra-processed and processed foods is you eat them quickly and then they're digested quickly too. So they tend to cause, at least the studies are saying, they tend to cause more weight gain. And then if you eat a whole food diet, it should be a lot slower, which is definitely a benefit. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked at the study participants that were enrolled in. They looked like a pretty good mix of people. I think the average age was like 39. The BMI was 25, the average BMI. So it looked like a pretty good group of people.
Yeah, it was the first study I actually saw, like with almost 20% Asian population.
Yeah, that's right. The only issue I would say is that they're comparing a pretty healthy omnivore diet to a vegan diet. So the issue is that you're not going to see very much difference, but just like what exactly happened here is that the omnivores also improved.
Right.
Because they're not used to eating probably as healthy as what they were given those meals. So
I mean,
everyone kind of improved.
Yes, but to their credit, they were trying to see would a vegan diet be better than a healthy omnivore diet rather than, I think I remember them talking about in the show, and they were just like, they wanted to make sure they didn't make it seem like we were doing a really crappy omnivore diet with a vegan diet.
And then somebody might just say that's because they're eating junk food or whatever.
Right.
It's not due to the vegan part. Yeah.
Right.
It's fair. It's a point that is very difficult to see the benefits.
Right. It's hard, especially in only 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe in 52 weeks or even half a year, 26 weeks. But 8 weeks is a short period of time for sure.
But they did say some interesting things which we couldn't find anywhere in the research paper about the telomere length.
Right.
They said that they didn't tell you how many base pairs were increased or whether it was a less shortening, or they didn't exactly give us any of that information. Yeah,
they said the vegan group, the telomeres grew. They were longer.
Yeah, which is
in only 8 weeks, which surprised even the researchers.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. That is definitely an interesting finding. Yeah.
They did make some casual reference to the idea about epigenetic aging, but they didn't tell us anything about the biologic age apart from the telomere part, but said they had done the measurements on that. On the show, they only looked at a couple of twins, but they didn't really tell us what happened to some of the other.
My question is, why were these? I think there was 4 sets selected for the show, and were they the only ones that wanted to do it? Or were they the only ones that were, I don't know, dramatic enough for television? Like television, you can't be dry. You can't, they want a certain personality, I guess. So I wonder if that adds. So that would be nice to know too. How did they select these 4 that were on the show? Although that has, that has a little bearing on the study itself. But it is interesting. 22 sets. I think 1 dropped out because of one of the twins couldn't finish it or something like that. So 1 set of twins dropped out. So 21 finished the study, but only 4 were on the show.
Yeah,
interesting.
So we don't really get a sense of who was there and what happened. But I think on the whole, my feedback was that shows like this, where there seems to be an agenda already happening, which in this show they're talking about animal rights and husbandry.
Yeah, that's where it kind of went off the tracks a bit too.
Environmental pollution and again, all very important issues. One of the reasons why I'm vegan myself is because of some of these issues, but I wouldn't want to get mixed in with a study.
Right.
Because
this was supposed to be a study.
Yeah, they shouldn't mix them in because let the study results show themselves. We don't need some of these extra things to kind of confuse people about the benefits of what they're trying to do in the study.
Yeah, I don't know. This is such a tough one because for television, you need to make it interesting. How do you make it interesting with just the study results? Because then it wouldn't have been 4 episodes, I'm sure. It could have been like down to 1 episode, and nobody probably would have watched it except for geeks like us. We would have watched it to see what's going on. but you need to make it interesting for TV. So the study itself was better. I thought it was more on point, but it still lacked a few things like we were talking about, the calorie count should be the same and the saturated fat should be the same.
But even the other stuff about, let's say, sexual function, I think there could have been better ways to look at this. And it doesn't necessarily explain, vegan versus omnivore. I mean, it could have been related. Like both had hundreds of percents improvement in blood flow or whatever heat maps.
Yep.
So one went from 250% to 350%.
Right.
We're still talking like massive increases.
Yeah,
So it's just by the nitrates in the food. That's what I'm starting to think, that was related to nitrates.
Did they say that? I don't know if they...
They didn't even look at that. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that it doesn't, why? Just eating healthier, just increased blood flow? Did we have like...
So to step back and talk about why they looked at blood flow in the groin region is to see, their theory is that if you improve blood flow in that area, then you're likely improving it in the heart and the brain and all the important organs. I'm not aware of too much about that area, like how much does it correlate. We do know that in diabetes, for example, we tell people like erectile dysfunction is often a side effect of diabetes, not because of the medications, but just because of the high sugars over time. And so we tell people, look, if you're getting erectile dysfunction from diabetes, then there's most likely you are getting some blockages in the heart area and the brain and all that. So there must be some correlation. I'm just not aware of exactly how much it is. And if you increase it in that area, like what if you give somebody Viagra? You're definitely increasing blood flow down there, men and women, but does that necessarily lead to cardiac benefits? I don't know. Otherwise, we'd be all taking Viagra every day.
Well, some of the cardiologists are prescribing 5 milligrams of Viagra these days, Cialis.
right, Cialis,
these days for heart benefits. But
well, and then the urologists are doing it as well. Was it the urologist? Yeah, for BPH.
Yeah.
Benign prostatic hypertrophy, so large prostate.
no, probably a good thing. I just thought this was more for show. It was a show for show that they were using this as an indicator of cardiovascular health. There could have been way better ways to look for benefits rather than, what type of porn they were looking at. Because there could have been differences in the type of porn or whatever, or it was an off day or God knows what.
And we had, there's
other variables. There's a whole bunch of other variables that they introduced here.
And other variables that you can watch with your family.
Yeah.
Like this was like, we started watching the episode. I think I mentioned this in the last time we were together. We started watching with my father-in-law, and it was like, when that part came on, we were all like scrambling for the remote control because it was a very interesting way to go about it. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think this was great. I hope people enjoyed it. I think we kind of gave. What would you say?
Yeah. Well, what was your biggest surprise from this study?
I was. This thing about the muscle loss was really like it kind of. I really took that as a takeaway that it's really important for people to make sure to get enough protein intake into their food.
Right.
So you can be a vegetarian, vegan, but if you're not eating enough protein, it can have a massive impact on muscle building.
Right.
So that to me I took as a really good, kind of reminder that get enough protein in your diet, and it is easier to get protein when you're eating meat.
Right.
So vegetarians just need to be a bit more conscientious about getting in those meat substitutes that are high protein.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I took back because if you're losing all this muscle, it's not good.
Right. Yeah. I would say, and then of course the working out piece.
What about you? For you, what was the biggest takeaway?
I think mine was actually a fact we didn't talk about yet.
What's that?
They mentioned in I think episode 4 it was that the average American, or in America, there's 21,000 slices of pizza eaten per minute, which I found astounding. Was it per minute, per hour? I think it was per hour. Excuse me, per hour. Like 21,000. That's a lot of slices of pizza.
Yeah. And I thought they did a whole thing about vegan cheese and these aren't healthy.
Yeah, that was the other thing.
These are not healthy food choices.
Yeah, the
like
vegan,
having a vegan cheese, not a healthy food choice.
Yeah.
Just because it's vegan doesn't make it healthy.
It's processed. It's even more processed.
Yeah, the way they're showing it is still very high in probably fat.
Yeah.
So it's.
And we know, as human beings, we do not have a good track record with processed food.
Yeah.
Every time we try to process something, bad things seem to come about from that.
So I think, again, the agenda was there to demonize meat eating, but replacing it with processed, potentially unhealthy vegan food wasn't the answer.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like these, and I think the market is speaking too right now. I think what is Beyond Meat burgers and all that kind of stuff, they were hot for a while, and then they kind of cooled off because people realized, wait a second, yeah, this is vegetarian, but like if you look at the list of ingredients, they're enormous. Now they're getting better. I think we mentioned last time they're getting shorter and better, but I don't know.
I think we should do an episode on just a taste test of different veggie burgers.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Because it'd be interesting to get your take, because you're a meat eater.
Yeah,
So it
and
might be
don't tell me
interesting
which
to-
one you're giving to me, and it would be interesting, actually.
Interesting. You know, I eat these burgers, but I think the problem is the patties. You're right. I mean, they're not going to they may not necessarily be better than a meat patty, but
I think
that part's the environmental benefits are
Right. But wouldn't you feel better about eating, like, let's say, a veggie patty, but it's made out from whole beans and all that kind of stuff, rather than, are you talking about like the Beyond Meat kind of stuff?
Yeah.
So you have that, and
Yeah.
do you like the flavor? Let's start with that.
I do like the flavor, and
Okay.
I think it's definitely, I prefer that over, eating meat because of environmental and
Right.
ethical issues.
Do you like the flavor more than, let's say, a regular veggie patty with beans and whatever vegetables might be in there? Or do you just need the variety?
Yeah, I don't mind. I kind of like it. The only issue is that sometimes I find it tastes too much like meat, which
Right.
I don't really like.
Okay.
But,
Right.
but I think they've done a good job. I think the issue is that when people are adding in like a white bun
Right.
with a whole bunch of condiments and stuff like that, that's where the problem is.
Yeah,
really
if
is.
you're
And
vegan, whether you're vegan or
it doesn't really-
omnivore, yeah.
Both aren't good, and I think that's the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, it basically comes down to whole foods. We're supposed to be eating as whole foods as possible, but we
Yeah.
keep finding ways to process food. And that's a little bit troublesome. I think that's always going to lead to, I think, worse outcomes.
Yeah, so just trying to get people to replicate, food tastes of what we have right now is probably not the answer. I mean, people have to eventually change their taste buds to eat less processed food, less added sugars, and so on.
Right.
But it's going to take time. Like, you can't expect someone to start liking the taste of less saturated, less sugar.
So do you think this is a necessary step then? If, let's say, for example, let's say I'm an omnivore and I want to become, maybe not vegan, but vegetarian at least, is one of the ways to get me there to offer me food that tastes like meat?
And cheaper is what their point was.
Right, and
Yeah.
more sustainable for the planet
Yeah.
and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But let's say I decide to do it and I fall in love with that and I say, okay, this tastes just as good, I'm fine with that, and great, I'm doing all these good stuff. But then you still have the same step to make from there to
get
whole foods.
Yeah. You're right. Maybe that's a good point. It's still a good, worthwhile step, and I think that's what they were trying to say here, is that take that step at least to change over from a meat-based product to a not meat-based product. But again, it's not necessarily a health benefit.
Right.
That's a benefit for the planet. And
With
it's a
the other
benefit
stuff they
for-
talked about in the whole
Yeah,
series.
it's a benefit for animal welfare, and it's a benefit for
Yeah.
other things, but the environment. But yeah, I don't think that it wasn't necessarily a health benefit.
Right, right. I mean,
That's
yeah.
if you're just making that exact conversion without taking care of the other issues about processed food and sugars. And,
Yeah, I think they're trying to walk
types
that
of stuff.
line between flavor and getting people to. And interestingly, even then, even though they used all these foods that tasted like meat, at the end, did you notice that most of the people did not go vegetarian? They usually, the average person cut back on their meat consumption. There were a few that went vegetarian, but even out of the 4 people that were on the show, 1 pair went to vegetarian. The rest.
Oh, they showed the post like
I
how
did.
long after?
It was in episode 4.
Oh, okay.
Or it was somewhere. I can't remember where I saw it, but yeah, only 1 actually became vegetarian. 1 pair. And in the surveys during the whole time, they talked about the satisfaction.
They had
of the
less
food.
satisfaction.
Yes, the vegan group did have less satisfaction,
Yeah.
even though they already tasted like meat. Now imagine if they had tried to do like the Dean Ornish diet,
Yeah.
which is really healthy, a vegetarian diet that's been proven to reverse heart disease and all that. So the interesting thing about this study was that even though they tried to make the food taste like meat, at the end, not too many people became vegetarians. Now imagine if they had actually used foods like in the Dean Ornish diet, which really does reverse heart disease. It's been proven, but it's like so low fat and it's such a big drastic change that if only 1 set of the 4 went to vegetarian in this study, I don't think anybody would have. That's a tall ask. So it's, yeah. How do you do this? How do we get people to eat better? I agree with you. I don't think throwing more processed foods is necessarily the right answer. But then, flavor-wise, how do we get there?
Well, I think for this purpose, they should have just gone hardcore and made showed those completely different, maybe a more stricter, healthier diet, and see what maybe the changes would have been more impressive.
But then they'd have to get rid of the saturated fat.
Yeah, they'd have to do. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They'd have to.
You'd
But
wanna-
again, compare the two diets exactly.
Right.
And maybe I think if you compare the two diets exactly, compare the macronutrients, and you made them exactly the same, maybe you'd have no difference in results. Maybe there's nothing. Maybe the difference in a non-animal product protein versus a vegetarian protein is going to be the exact same. Maybe there's not that much difference.
Right.
Maybe it's a very mild difference.
Well, the other thing that they did, we didn't talk about, is the microbiome.
Yeah.
They did notice more varied microbiome.
Yeah.
Microbiome is all the bacteria in your colon, and so all the bacteria in our stool should be, the more variance you have, the better it is for you. There's lots of studies going on with this in all sorts of disease states, but they did find that the plant-based diet had, after 8 weeks, the people in that group did end up with a more varied
I think
microbiome.
it's a bifidobacteria or something was higher.
Yeah, I can't remember which one they said.
Proportion, but they didn't really go into it enough. They
Yeah.
didn't show us the distribution changes, so it's kind of hard to say much more.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, it'd be nice if we had some of that data.
Right. And again, that was
But it makes complete sense. Like if some of these plant foods are basically provide nutrients for the bacteria, so of course it might have a much healthier
right.
gut.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a little surprising to me because, well, I guess they got enough variance in the diet, but like if it was just the fake meat, I wouldn't think it would actually change. Well, maybe it would change the microbiome, but I don't think it would change it a lot.
Yeah.
But if you're throwing in a lot of veggie, although they did do, here's the other thing, they did do that with the Omnivore group. It was a much healthier diet, so they did get a lot of vegetables and all that. So maybe it is a significant finding that they did get more microbiome variance with vegan versus omnivore.
Interesting. Yeah.
We'll never know because it wasn't talked about that much, and I don't.
Maybe they're going to be publishing all this in another paper.
Maybe
A supplementary paper, but
Yeah, because this paper came out in November,
Yeah.
I believe, and this Netflix series just came out at the beginning of the year. So maybe there will be more papers. I'm not sure.
or maybe they might never publish it because nothing showed up. So
Yeah, insignificant could be. Could be.
Yeah, that's. Anyways, I hope that was interesting for all our viewers out there. Thank you so much, Anil, for coming.
Yeah,
all the
thanks
way
for
and
having me. It
doing
was great.
Doing this episode. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. It makes a big difference to getting the word out about what we're doing, making sure more people see our videos. So I really appreciate that. All right, take care.
Bye.